the archives. So here I have Mary Prince. She was formerly enslaved, and this is what she says in 1831 about her experience on the auction block being sold. The black morning came at length came. It came too soon for my poor mother and us, whilst she was putting on us the new Osnaburgs in which we were to be sold. That's like a cloth clothing there, but she said in a sorrowful voice, I shall never forget it. See, I am shrouding my poor children. What a task for a mother. The other slaves could only weep and lament with us. When I left my dear brothers and the house in which I had been brought up, I thought my heart would burst. So that, to me, it's not just to me, that is an experience on the auction, and not of one of uncomfortable, wanting to be sold well. So I include a lot of counter narratives in mine. And in addition to counter narratives, I also do image comparisons, such as the Greek theater masks that are often used in a textbook as like a side image for some visual stimulation. You can draw equivalencies to the minstrelsy representations, and I've talked about this in previous talks that I've given, and I've got recorded presentation on that I can share with you more. But I keep doing that. Okay, so here's another example. Go through these a little fast here. In the country, this is from Athenas's day. In the country, the slaves of farmers usually lived and ate with their masters. Aristophanes' comedies depict them as lively and cheeky characters, by no means downtrodden. So this example is given in the historical context section as well. And the first question to ask is, why are we citing Aristophanes, a comic playwright, on the emotions of enslaved people? And how are we doing it? Well, they usually lived in wait, so we're establishing a judgment of normalcy. So this is the typical experience, is happy. So, and by the way, this textbook has undergone many revisions and edited editions. And this, I believe this edition, we have 2016, but they even updated, I think there was a 2017 revised edition, and this sentence is still in there. So they usually lived and ate with their masters. And he depicts them as lively and cheeky characters and not at all downtrodden. So how else are students supposed to interpret this material? And being required to teach from this textbook, I have a lot to say about how to do that. But, and I have a whole chapter on pedagogical implications, chapter 6. So, nope, chapter 7, yes. So, and here is another example where I bring in transitivity. That is, who has the agency? How are they interacting? In this case, we have, in the country, the slaves of farmers usually lived and ate with their masters. Aristophanes' comedies depict them as lively and cheeky characters, by no means downtrodden. So we have, it's the slaves or the actors here. I actually just show you this example. I'm not going to get into the transitivity because we don't have time, but just about action and the fact that you can combine. It's not like you just you only look at appraisal and do the appraisal analysis. You absolutely can do appraisal and transitivity at the same time in the same passage, and you should. And this has we have, they usually lived in it, yes. And here, in addition to counter narratives that I bring in, I also bring in continuing narratives to show this thread through American racist ideas. And here we have Bill O'Reilly responding to Michelle Obama, commenting on how she lived in the White House that was built by enslaved Black people. And he says, slaves that worked there were well fed and had decent lodgings. I want to go back here for a second. They usually lived and ate with their masters. So the same type of argument. Provided by the government, which stopped hiring slave labor in 1802. However, the feds did not forbid subcontract slave labor. So Michelle Obama is essentially correct in citing slaves as builders of the White House, but there were others working as well. So Bill O'Reilly has been canceled in media, but his influence continues, especially among white supremacists. So then here's another example. This one really actually gets to the transitivity. This is from Latin for the New Millennium. The Romans did not reduce a single race or culture to slavery. Rather, slaves came from all over the Mediterranean world and typically fell into servile status by capture and war. So what we have is the Romans, when they are actors, when they are agents, it's about what they did not do. They did not discriminate. But when it's about enslavement, the slaves become the actor, well, they become the goal, as we have a by capture and war. So it's the capture and war that's the agency, that the war is the agent. And then when we describe slaves as coming from all over the Mediterranean world, what does it mean to come from? That's an immigration language, and typically fell into happenstance language. So there's a lot to unpack here in this description. And this is a good example of how on one side of the book, when it's open, you have description, historical context of enslavement, and then on the right side is comedy and a slave mask. And while I understand that that connection is necessary to discuss, there's no critical discussion of what that means. So you learn about enslavement and you learn about comedy, and that they're mixed together, and it's funny and enjoyable and a way to learn language. So what are my findings to sum up? There are 5 prevalent themes in 40 pages of data. And what I find is enslaved people as immigrants, enslaved people as property and goods, enslaved people as happy and lucky, lazy and sluggish, and yes, there are examples of oppressed and brutalized, but the majority of these sanitize and normalize enslavement. The same themes are prevalent in racist American discourse of enslavement today, and Greek and Latin textbooks thus heavily engage in a downplaying of enslavement and reinforce what have become racist narratives today. So pedagogical implications, this research can be used to educate textbook publishers, editors, authors, teachers, and learners. Conduct teacher training workshops on critical language awareness. Provide resources for student learning activities. And in my dissertation, I give all kinds of different examples for identification analysis, coding, and you can do basic. It doesn't have to be as complicated. Basic coding of who's doing what to whom. You probably already do that to some degree if you're a teacher in Greek and Latin. And composition, having your students come up with better descriptions and better work. And I just wanted to throw I wanted to share with you all, I had this element of creativity that I think is really important and in line with what I'm doing. So I was asking myself, how can my work embody what I advocate for? How can I use this opportunity to teach readers about enslavement and the lives of enslaved people? So every chapter begins with a prologue in which I quote a formerly enslaved Black person, and I connect the themes and their messages to the purpose of that chapter and the work that I'm doing. So future research, working on turning this into a handbook and publish current papers on progress and patterns of classical rhetoric in 19th century Black literature. And I really want to get more IRB studies. I had done some, but so we can have that hard data and that quantitative element as well. And here are my select references, and I know I'm out of time, but I really please, this is one of those slides that often gets overlooked. Please look at this and understand, and do that footwork, and do this reading if you haven't already, but understanding where I'm coming from and how I'm informed on this matter. So, so that's my dissertation. Again, I welcome you to email me if you're interested, my new email. And thank you so much for joining me.